All right, I'm in the parking lot of the movie theater. I'm going to go inside and see the movie. I'm late, so I'll let you know how I thought when I get back out.
In my head.
Okay, so as you can see, I'm outside the movie theater. Here we are, and that was pretty freaky, I have to say. I'm not going to spoil anything. I don't want to ruin the movie for anybody. I actually have never read the book myself. I never watched the original movie, so I didn't know what to expect, and what I saw was really freaky. If you are afraid of clowns, this may not be the movie for you to watch, but you probably know that already. It centers, just to give a little plot here, it centers around these children in this town where they're disappearing children, basically, and there's this creature called It, although it's kind of like a clown. I don't want to give anything away here, but the main monster in the movie is the clown, and these kids are all seeing these fearful experiences because of this clown, and they're trying to get to the bottom of like why the rest of the kids disappeared and everything, and they kind of I'm not going to give things away. But the thing that struck me the most about this movie was it was pretty good in its portrayal of things like phobias and PTSD, and the way that parents can abuse their children, and that can have a lasting mental effect on them. So I really liked it for that reason, actually. It made it way more creepier because that part was very realistic to me, the way that it portrayed abuse and how people can turn their heads away from abuse, and the people who were abused still have to live on with it. So, with that said, I think I should spend a little time talking about phobias and PTSD and the difference between the two, and what we need to do to face these things and to deal with them in reality, not in a movie. Although, I will say the characters did kind of what you're supposed to do. So if you see the movie, pay attention, because there's some lessons to be learned in the way that things were handled. Now, a phobia is an irrational fear. It's a fear of something, and we don't have a real reason to be afraid of it. We know it's not going to hurt us. So you may have a phobia of... It's hard to describe this, because people may say, like, you have a phobia of snakes, and it's like, well, a snake is something that you should be afraid of. A snake can hurt you. But a phobia of a snake would be like, the snake is behind glass and you can tell that it's not even able to get to you, and it still sets you off, and you react to it in such a strong way that other people around you wouldn't. Like, I just went to the Bronx Zoo and there were snakes at the exhibits, and if you're somebody who can't even look at the exhibit because you'll freak out and start screaming, that's an irrational fear, and you're having an inappropriate emotional response to it. So that would be something like a phobia. Where PTSD comes in is when you have a specific event in your life that occurred related to something. So let's say a tree fell on your car, and now you're afraid to be outside because every time you walk past a tree, you get this irrational fear that comes up and this body response, and you freak out, maybe even have something like a panic attack when you're around a tree or a leaf or something that reminds you of trees. And so typically when it comes to PTSD and phobias, we avoid the thing that makes us afraid. We try to get away from it, we try to protect ourselves from it, and we basically want to feel safe, and we don't want to have that reaction that we have, and we avoid things. In the case of PTSD, we may not even realize what we're avoiding. We may just be afraid, and we may just get angry and irritable when certain things happen. We may not even realize what it is that we're reacting to. We just get angry and irritable, or we get afraid and we feel like we need to get out of there. We feel anxious, we feel insecure. So it kind of goes in both directions. You either get hostile and want to fight back, or you avoid, and it's fight or flight, basically. That's what happens with PTSD, and it's tied to a specific event. And a phobia, typically, we just want to avoid. We're not so much the fight back kind of thing, because it's not a fight or flight response, it's just a fear. Now, both of them have a similar approach to healing from them, and that would be exposure. Exposure therapy is typically what it's called, and it's something, I've gone through exposure myself. I've done my own self-exposure on things because I've had PTSD. I have, to some degree, had some phobias, and there's things that I could still work on in my life. So exposure is kind of an ongoing process. It's not something that you just do a couple of times and then you're done, although some people can have really good results just going through the exposure process. For example, I started to develop a phobia around driving, and just being in the car ramped up my anxiety super high if I was going anywhere beyond a couple of miles from where I lived. But I had a therapist tell me, like, what you should do is start to go a little bit further each time, and eventually it will die down. And the advice that she gave me, which was really good advice, was do something that causes you just a teeny tiny bit of anxiety. Don't do something that's like full-blown, like driving out of state. Go a few more blocks than is comfortable for you, and do it gradually and do it slowly. And by progressively exposing myself to the thing that I was afraid of, now I can drive pretty much anywhere. I feel okay. I might feel some anxiety if I'm a little bit far away. There's a security person going around the parking lot. But that's just kind of like a normal anxiety that anybody would have when they drive far. So what I've learned is that exposure is a gradual process. Now, if you have a really strong phobia or a really strong PTSD, of course, it's natural. You're going to want to avoid it. Even through the process of exposing yourself, you're going to have periods where you avoid it. It's going to be a little bit too much for you. However, you don't have to do things in leaps and bounds. As my therapist said, do little tiny bits. And a therapist is a great person to do this with because they can help you. Some therapists will actually go out to wherever you need to be exposed so that they can act as kind of like a safety net. But they'll give you tools, ways to change your thinking that you should be able to calm yourself down. And they can do this in the therapist room. They can expose you through your thoughts. You don't have to actually experience, let's say you're afraid of snakes. You don't have to experience the snake right away. You can just think about snakes. And typically that's enough for somebody who has a phobia to freak out a little bit. Just thinking about it kind of makes your anxiety rise up. And that's a good way to practice, is to think about it. Then you know you're safe. You know there's no snakes around. You know nothing's going to get you. And that little bit of exposure can walk you to the next step, which might be going outside of a building that you know has a snake in it. And then maybe walking inside the building, and then maybe walking up to the glass. And again, this is done over a long period of time, and it's done so that you feel comfortable. It's just enough anxiety to be anxiety. Okay, so I mentioned that you have thoughts that go through your head typically when you have a fear. You know, whenever anxiety rises within us, there's thoughts that go along with this. Thoughts of things like, I'm not safe, I'm going to be hurt, this is dangerous, I need to get out of here, I need to fight back. Whatever those thoughts are, cognitive behavioral therapy is another way that you can deal with that. So cognitive behavioral therapy specifically has you examining your thoughts and examining your behaviors in relation to your thoughts and examining how you feel. And when you break it down into smaller pieces and you have a therapist as a guide to help you look at the way that you're experiencing things, it can open up a little bit of an alternative in your mind and an alternative in the way that you behave, so that you can get unstuck from this fear or from this PTSD that you're experiencing and start to move forward a little bit. So that's another option for you. And there are many other options. You know, go in and see a therapist if this is something that you're really struggling with, because they can open things up and get things moving for you really quickly. Phobias in particular are something that can be managed super fast. Like, in relation to, if you think about, like, a phobia can cripple you for years, and some of you out there may have experienced this, and I totally get it, I understand. You can resolve some of them in weeks, you know, a couple of months, let's say. Maybe if it's really bad, a year, 2 years max, I would say, because it seems like these things are so crippling and so frightening, and like we are never going to be able to handle them. But that is the thoughts that come along with these things. They're not reality. And going back to the movie, you'll see what I'm talking about. That is a big point that I got out of the movie, is that we can't allow these things to take over. We have to do something about them. We have to manage them. And my message here for you is go see the movie because it's a good movie, but also know that there is hope for you if you're dealing with some kind of PTSD, some kind of phobia. You can get through it. You can reach out for help. People will understand. Trust me, therapists see this all the time. It's not something that's unusual. Maybe it seems like it's crazy to you and like nobody else feels this way, but it's way more common than you realize, and probably people around you have phobias and they just aren't talking about it, or they've experienced PTSD and they just aren't talking about it. So you're not alone in this. You can handle this. There is a way to deal with it. I would recommend to go see a therapist. Of course, if you can't see a therapist for some reason, find some kind of social support, get some kind of self-help book, read about it online, do everything you can, because the longer that, unfortunately, with a lot of mental problems, the longer that you allow it to continue, kind of the more progressive it can get and the worse that it can get. And so you want to cut it off when you can. Not that it won't be able to be treated. It's not going to change the effect of being able to treat it. It's just going to make it maybe a little bit harder and take a little bit longer to work out the problem. So I would encourage you to go ahead and seek help now if you're experiencing a phobia or some kind of PTSD. I went through PTSD myself. I totally understand. I just want to see you get better. So thank you for watching my little quick review of it and a discussion of phobias and PTSD and some things you can do about it. If you like this kind of topic, I do mental health videos on my channel here. I'm up to 250 videos now, so I'd be excited to have you join me. If you want to help support this channel, I have a Patreon page, and I'm working on some kind of web series thing, which is kind of weird still coming out of my mouth, but I am working on it. So thank you to the people who do watch me and who are having patience while I create that. It's a new experience for me. If you saw the movie, let me know. What did you think about it? Leave a comment down below, and thank you for joining me, everybody here. I'll see you around next time.